to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 220. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
Before we get going into this week's program, I want to just mention something from last week. We heard a really awesome recording at the end called Put It There, Buried Alive.
And we were indeed buried alive by it.
Yeah, that was an organ trio, guitar, organ, and drums, and a trio of baritone saxophones. And that was on Cornerstone Records. And we had just mentioned at the end that there didn't seem to be a CD available. But I want to correct that. There is a CD available, at least in North America already. You can get that if you go to Cornerstone Records homepage, www.cornerstonerecordsinc.com, and you can find it there. It will be available here in Japan, probably by the end of August, it looks like. I just wanted to let listeners know if you enjoyed it as much as we did. That's from the president there. Another Barry Elms.
Yeah, that's good news for me because I'm a big CD collector, as our listeners know. And I'd like to have that one.
Yeah, that was really a lot of fun. All right, before we get into this week's music, we've got a few departures from the music world, Mike, so I'm going to have to get over to the piano here and play our theme. And there's two in classical this week.
Yeah, and they all happened at the end of the week, just before we were going to go up. So the first one is the British conductor Roger Norrington, and I was very sorry to hear about this one. I'll explain why in a little bit more. Roger Norrington, he's a conductor, and he died on July 18th at age 91, so that's a pretty long life. And he was known for his historically informed performances and was among the first to advocate for period instruments and minimal vibrato. And let me tell you, back in the day, this caused a lot of strife within the classical music community. Some of us were really excited by it, like me, and others were really angry about it. They really wanted things to continue the way they were, and they pretty much have, although these days, like, period performance has influenced a lot of what we hear in classical music, even with big orchestras. I remember he put out this Beethoven symphonies box. He did all the Beethoven symphonies in this new style. And, oh boy, it caused all kinds of back and forth. But I was really excited by it, I remember. It was like hearing the Beethoven symphonies for the first time. Like, except again, you know it was coming, but you didn't know what it was going to sound like. You know, it was kind of interesting. They sounded different than what I was used to. And that's what really got me into classical music. Because when you grew up, you'd hear classical music on the Bugs Bunny cartoons or in the Disney movie Fantasia. And those performances would stick in your head, and pretty much recordings sounded like that. But then suddenly there were these other performances that didn't sound like that. It was exciting. There was a little bit of an edge to them. It was great. And Norrington sort of achieved that in his recordings too. And I actually met Roger Norrington at the Sanders Theater at Harvard University back in the late 1980s.
Wow.
He wasn't performing there. He was in the audience hearing, I remember Oskar Shumsky, the violinist, play Elgar's Violin Concerto. And I was there for that. And I went up to him and I said that I really loved that Beethoven box set. And he was really very humble. He was he accepted my compliments, with that British humbleness that they have. I would say because of Roger Norrington and other people like Trevor Pinnock and Emma Kirkby are why I started to love classical music. I was really lucky to be around at that time, I guess, and getting into it then. They all transformed the music I grew up with hearing and made it more exciting. So rest in peace, Roger Norrington. That's a big loss. We also learned that the American double bass virtuoso Gary Carr died on July 16th at age 83. He played a pivotal role in elevating the double bass to a solo instrument and gave a lyrical character to the bass. And especially in his 1962 debut with Leonard Bernstein and the New York Philharmonic, he played Saint-Saëns' The Swan on double bass, And it's a cello piece, but it kind of made the double bass a bit more of a solo instrument. There were others who were doing the same sort of thing, but he was very visible, sort of, and made it like an acceptable thing. And now anybody who solos on the double bass has him and a handful of other bassists to thank for that. He worked to advance the instrument as founder member of the International Society of Bassists, which he founded in 1967, and as a teacher at the Juilliard School and Yale University. So Gary Carr will be missed as well.
Yeah, I saw Christian McBride make a little dedication to him on Facebook. And over in the jazz world, we lost the great pianist Hal Galper, who passed away also on Friday, July 18th at the age of 87. A Massachusetts native, he studied classical piano in his youth, but he switched to jazz, studying at the Berklee College of Music. He worked with Chet Baker, Stan Getz, and Joe Williams early on, and he replaced George Duke in the Cannonball Adderley Quintet in the early 1970s. For 10 years, from 1980 to 1990, he was a member of the Phil Woods Quintet, along with Tom Harrell, which is where I became a big fan of his playing. He recorded at least 24 albums as a leader and more as a sideman with a lot of great artists, including John Scofield. He was on the faculty of Purchase College and the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, and he also wrote a lot. He wrote articles on theory and practice as well, including an article on the psychology of stage fright, something musicians all have to overcome in their careers. So many contributions to the music world. Rest in peace, Hal Galper. All right, we're ready to get into some new music for this week's program. And in the episode description, as always, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings we're going to discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. If you can't see the full description or the recording list and links are hard to follow wherever you're listening to us now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, PODBEAN.com. Everything's easy to follow over there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe and tell a music-loving friend. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that helps us get listed in the podcast music category recommendations, and that's another way that we can grow our audience. Come over and follow us on our Facebook page as well to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. You can leave a comment or a message there. Check us out on X too. I post links to the new episodes when they're published. We're Adult Music Pod over there. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples as part of our discussion, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. We also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. Now we're ready to jump into some Baroque, Mike.
Yeah, we are. We're going to head to the Bayreuth Court this week for our Baroque album, and this is an album called In Wilhelmine's Footsteps, music of the Bayreuth Court, and it's performed by a Danish ensemble called Camerata Øresund, and that's on the Channel Classics label, released on June 20th. Still mining that June 20th date. Wow. There's going to be another one next week, too.
Wow.
It was a gold rush that day. I can't get past it. Still listening to all those records. Anyway, Camerata Øresund are from Copenhagen, Denmark, and the members are Peter Spiske, who is the musical director. He's also a violinist in the ensemble, along with Tina Albrechtsen, Ida Lorentzen, and Alison Luthmers. We also have Rastko Rocknik on Baroque viola, Hanna Loftsdottir on Baroque cello. Sounds like an Icelandic name. And Joachim Pedersen on Baroque bass. Now, Wilhelmine von Bayreuth lived 1709 to 1758, so this really isn't a Baroque album. It's more of a kind of between the Baroque and classical era being Mozart and Haydn. It's more of a gallant sort of thing. Anyway, Wilhelmine von Bayreuth was a composer, instrumentalist, and patron of the arts. Indeed she was. This is a recording of music by her and by musicians in her circle. It's kind of nice. You kind of get into this little circle here and find out what they were doing. By the way, she was Frederick the Great's sister, and that's kind of an important point because Frederick the Great was a music-loving ruler himself. He played the flute, and he knew C.P.E. Bach and people like that. Wilhelmina was a harpsichordist, and she actually wrote some music for them to play together. Their father apparently did not approve of their music making. How did this happen? They had to learn these instruments, I guess, to become genteel people at the time. But he wanted the Frederick to be in the military and Wilhelmina to be the equivalent of whatever a housewife was at that time, to follow the more womanly things that you would do back then. But both of them became musicians not professional ones, but a lot of music is attributed to them and their circles. Anyway, the first piece we have on this album is tracks 1 through 5, Johann Pfeiffer, Suite in G minor for oboe or violin, concertato, strings, and basso continuo. Guess which instrument we're going to hear. It's going to be the violin, of course. There's no oboe on this record. Pfeiffer was one of the most influential musicians at Wilhelmina's court. He was concertmaster and taught Wilhelmina composition. We open this multi-movement work with an overture. It starts with a quick-moving dotted rhythm, a little unusual. It's not the slow French overture type of rhythm. It's the French overture rhythm, but it's very fast. It sounds rather playful here, and the fugue section starts at the 40-second mark. Those customarily followed the overture opening, and this moves at a quick pace too. Camerata Øresund brings some vivacity and life to the movement. The fugue has a rushing quality to it, like a quick-moving stream, and I really rather enjoyed that part. And that's the part I'm going to sample. We're going to go into the middle of the fugue. You don't just get that solid cadence in a fugue, do you? Anyway, the second track, the second movement, Rigodon, which is a dance. This has a pretty quick pace to it too, and the brief A section of the theme repeats. There's a B section, and then back to the A section. The energy is high, and there are some teasing pauses in the texture before we're rushing off again. Track 3, Air en Carillon. This is creatively orchestrated by Pfeiffer, with pizzicati answering the energetic legato theme. Remember, carillon is like bells, sort of, and trying to get that effect here. I really enjoyed this particular movement. Let's hear a little bit of it. Yeah, charming. I guess the pizzicati represent the carillon in this particular piece. Camerata Øresund in this movement inject their infectious energy into the music. It just sounds great. You could hear it there. And it's a good, not a very fast tempo, but really well realized. It sounds great. Track 4, Menuet 1 and 2. This is pretty straightforward. This is a swaying menuet, and the second menuet is contrasted via the use of a flute. So that's a little bit of a surprise there. And that is Cecilia Floden on the traverso, the transverse wooden flute. She joins the ensemble for the repeat of the first minuet. Some nice arranging here, too. The ensemble is making this work come alive, and I'm going to go and sample a section with the flute in it so you can kind of get this little new timbre in your ear. Okay, and the fifth movement is a Chacona. Strings and harpsichord continuo are played by Marcus Molin on the harpsichord. Brings this lightly flowing Chacona some brightness. And then Cecilia Floden is back in on flute for a section. Some nice arranging here as well. Anyway, that's the end of that piece, and then we go on to a composition by, possibly, Wilhelmine von Bayreuth. I say possibly because the authorship is disputed here. It could also be by this guy, Johann Gotthilf Jenischen. Now, Gotthilf means God's help, which is kind of an interesting name to give your child. Anyway, concerto in G minor for harpsichord, strings, and basso continuo. Marcus Mohlin is on the solo harpsichord in this work. Authorship of this concerto is being questioned due to the discovery of new autograph versions of the work. So track 6 is our first movement, Allegro, the fast movement. And we haven't really heard a slow movement yet on this album. The first suite was taken at a bit of a quick pace. Yeah. And we start off, of course, with a fast movement as well. There's energy to this. It sounds like Camerata Øresund are very enthusiastic about this project. They just sound really like they want to give you everything they've got on each track. When the harpsichord comes in at the 30-second mark as the solo instrument, it's got a bit of distance to it so that it sounds quietly but clearly. There's a bit of a muted chiming tone to it, sounding like the way the instrument was captured on the old Addams Family TV show, if you remember Lurch playing the harpsichord. I don't think, though, that Lurch would have played with this much vivacity, though. He seemed a more, like, dour type, you know? I think he kind of set the image of the harpsichord for us, you know, but it's really doesn't have to be that way. Let's hear the harpsichord solo at the 2-minute mark. What I'm fading out on there is that braying donkey sound. That's kind of what I, that octave sort of interval that I related to. It reminds me of a donkey. Anyway, it comes up before the harpsichord takes off with the solo many times in the movement. The harpsichord's flowing pattern at 3 minutes and 30 seconds comes across as particularly satisfying in tone and flow. For his solo cadenza at 5 minutes and 19 seconds, Mohlin gets a lightly percussive sound out of the instrument's attack before playing upward-moving arabesques. The theme returns afterwards to end this very pleasing movement. I would suggest hearing it all the way through. Track 7, the second middle movement, Andante Cantabile. This is a proper slow movement, the first on the album. The strings flow well, with the harpsichord providing some continuo at the opening, playing chords. Mohlin steps out for his solo at the 30-second mark, and it sounds great on the muted chime of his instrument. Let's hear him enter and play a little bit of his entry line here. Alright, let's come out of it there. The harpsichord part has a lot of amiable passages in the solo section, and there's a nicely taken false cadence at the end that ushers in a brief harpsichord cadenza. It's a lovely section. Sample this movement in full, too. In fact, you may as well just hear this whole work. Track 8 is the third movement, Gavotte 1 and 2. I'm not going to sample this, but the strings play the opening phrases with the solo harpsichord ending them, and the rhythm has sufficient bounce to it to define this as a dance movement. At 1 minute and 20 seconds, the solo harpsichord begins the less bouncy but melodically appealing second gavotte, without accompaniment. The first gavotte returns to bring the work to its conclusion. Track 9, we get a work that's definitely by Wilhelmine von Bayreuth, a song, or an aria, I guess, from her opera Argenore, which was, I guess, first performed or written in 1740. Published then, performed then, I'm not really sure. It's called Un certo freddo orrore, and I would like to issue a complaint here to the Channel Classics label for not providing the text to this and the other sung text on this album. Come on, we need to know what the singer is singing about. This is not an opera anyone has ever heard, except for like one or two scholars. I don't know what it's about. Well, actually, I do, because the notes talk about that, and I'll explain that to you a bit right now. This track features Josefine Andersson as mezzo-soprano. The plot of Argenore is tragic, and it can be seen as an autobiographical reflection on Wilhelmina's and Frederick's unhappy childhood. 6 of the 7 characters die in the final scene, leaving one character, Martensia, abandoned and without hope. Something to lift your mood for modern times, huh? Anyway, the title of the aria, Un certo freddo orrore, means a certain cold horror, so I'm guessing this is going to be a really dramatic text. I like these kinds of programs where there's a vocalist who isn't the featured artist on the album, so she just sings a few tracks and we get to hear instrumentals for the rest of the way. I like the way it breaks up the flow a little bit, give us a little variety. Andersson starts this low down in the range of her richly toned voice. The aria itself has some appealing repeated vowel patterns and turns of phrases, and Andersson executes them admirably. The pacing is on the slow side, though flowing, and that allows us to enjoy the beauty of tone in Andersson's voice. Let's hear a bit of her. A little marching rhythm there to accompany her. I like the way she, along with the ensemble, gives this work some character, making it stand out on the album, not only for the vocals. It sounds resolute with its march-like rhythm and strong downbeats. Andersson goes for her only high note in the work in the last minute, just before the track ends. Tracks 10 through 12, Wilhelmine von Bayreuth's Sonata in A minor for flute and basso continuo. Cecilia Floden, flautist here. So, of course, Wilhelmina's brother Frederick played the flute, and also Wilhelmina's husband played it, so I guess she always had someone to accompany when performing this work. Track 10 is the first movement marked Affettuoso. We, of course, hear Cecilia Floden on traverso in this work, standing in for Frederick the Great, or Wilhelmina's husband. The opening theme is endearing, especially given Floden's warm, woody tone. Let's hear the opening. And that cadence is an ideal place to come out of this. That, of course, is Marcus Molen on the harpsichord, and the Camerata Øresund lends some accompanimental tone as well. The movement ends with an open cadence. Track 11, the second movement, Presto. This is a little unusual. You have this piece really goes slow, fast, slow.
Yeah.
Generally, Vivaldi set the opposite pattern, fast, slow, fast. But we get the opposite here. So the second movement is presto, and the presto has more urgency, of course, but the flute's tone gives it a softness of character. Floden's solo passages are smoothly and appealingly taken. And let's hear a little bit of this, too. You notice how Floden keeps that beautiful tone throughout. She doesn't really fly through those passages. She kind of takes them very deliberately, and it just sounds really great. I really like the comfortable feel that those passages give us. And Wilhelmine gave her brother quite a workout on the flute in this movement, and her husband too. Track 12, the third movement, Allegro. I liked the light, breezy quality of the theme of this movement, and I sampled this too. I guess I just liked this work a lot. Let's hear a little bit of this too. This movement is brief at under 2 minutes, but keeps up its appeal throughout, as does Floden via her flute playing. Tracks 13 through 15, Bernhard Joachim Hagen, Concerto in D minor for lute, 2 violins, viola, and cello. And the solo lutist here is Doyo Sol. Hagen, the composer, was a lutenist and violinist, and worked as an assistant to Kapellmeister Pfeiffer at the Bayreuth court at the age of 17. Now, Kapellmeister Pfeiffer is the first composer that we heard on this album. Hagen is one of the most important composers of the Baroque era for the lute. Track 13 is the first movement of this 3-movement work, Allegro non tanto. The opening is all strings. The lute is in after 1 minute of introductory material, and it's quiet and spare in its playing. Let's hear a little bit of it. There's a lot of space, and the strings are gentle and even cautious when playing along, sounding as though they're handling something fragile. It lightens the mood to hear this. The lute gets a solo section at the 3-minute mark. Doyo Sol has a light touch on the instrument, achieving a level of gentleness that's instantly mood-altering. Something to shield the listeners from what's going on outside the front door, or possibly the other room. After this solo, the strings go right to an open cadence to set up a movement-ending cadenza in this lute. Sol gets a lot of space to play in this movement. Track 14, Poco Andante, the second movement. This movement starts with an amiable curving line sensitively taken by the Camerata's strings. The lute comes in almost sounding like continuo, but soon establishes himself as the soloist with the melodic line, again playing sensitively and leaving a lot of space to hear through. He plays quite a bit in the lower mid-range end of the instrument in the second minute, showing off the muted timbre of his lute. Track 15, The third movement, Allegro. The Allegro has a light bounce to it and is taken rather slowly to accent that bounce. Let's hear a bit of that along with the lute's entry. The phrasing in this movement is particularly well realized given all of the space the tempo leaves. Track 16, Wilhelmine von Bayreuth's Argenore again. We have another aria from that opera called Senza Aita, or Without Help. This features Josephine Andersson, mezzo-soprano, and this one is stormier than the first one that we heard. The character here sounds fiery, so let's hear a little bit of her. It's a very neatly manicured performance. It just sounds really great. Pacing is good. It doesn't get histrionic. The emotion comes across. Andersson brings a lot of passion to the vocals here and some appealing phrasing as well. Even in wilder passages, she keeps her tone focused while putting the emotion across. Andersson's last tone is the highest. These works in this opera all seem to save that highest note for last. Anyway, tracks 17 through 21, the last work on the album by Pietro Locatelli, Concerto Grosso in G minor, opus 1, number 12. Wilhelmine accompanied the violinist Pietro Locatelli on the harpsichord when he visited Berlin. So this is a 5-movement work. It mirrors the first work that we heard, which was also 5 movements, and that was by Pfeiffer. The Largo, in this case, the first movement, has a flowing but seemingly directionless opening. It finds its way to a chord and has direction from then on, but there are some chromatic moments that blur that sense. It's an interesting movement. It ends on an open cadence leading to the next movement. I'll leave you to sample it. It's pretty interesting, especially harmonically. Track 18, the second movement, Allemanda, marked Allegro. This has an unusual, energetic bounce to it, and I rather liked this. So let's hear a bit. Man, we're just not getting that cadence, are we? Locatelli's a real practical joker there. This movement keeps that profile and energy throughout, that sort of bounce. Track 19, the third movement, Sarabanda, Vivace. This is a more flowing saraband with the requisite sadness and gravity intact. It's taken at a bit of a fast pace by the ensemble here, and it ends at another open cadence. And this brings us to track 20, the fourth movement, Presto. This brief presto has a winding quality to it, and again, enthusiastic energy from the Camerata, and I want to sample this too. Track 21, the final movement, fifth movement, Gavotta, marked Allegro. There's a playful quality to the opening staccato notes leading to an answer high in the violins that I found very appealing. Locatelli has a lot of really interesting ideas. The movement seems to be in two sections, A and B, both of which are repeated, and maintain the rhythm we hear at the opening. And that's the end of the album. Camerata Øresund sound like they've brought a lot of enthusiasm to this project. All of the movements have a spring to the rhythm and lightness of attack to the overall muted tone that give the listener the impression that the ensemble wants you to hear and remember these works, and I think they succeed. There's some variety to the sound of the various works provided by Marcus Molen on harpsichord and Cecilia Floden on flute. It's music that's really never heard, and there seems to be a lot of appealing music from the Baroque era. I should also mention in that group the lutenist Doyo Sol, too, who brings some variety to the record as well. Not only does this album introduce us to new music, but it also gives us a picture of the music making among a particular gathering of musicians, those of Wilhelmine and her associates. It's an appealing and even edifying listen.
I really enjoyed this recording. There's a lot of variety in the program here. Flute, lute, harpsichord, and then the program is neatly broken up by these vocal works as well. The Camerata Øresund play passionately with excitement. Everything sounds great on the recording. It's kind of neat to have an insight into a little scene of music in a certain point of history with composers that we're probably not going to hear from again, and you can imagine what the little scene was like there. The style in the period was interesting. There are the gallant influences that I enjoy, like diverting of expectations. There's a few points with slamming on of the brakes, and overall it's very classy. And I enjoyed this program. I'd like to hear more sort of settings of music, and we can imagine in a little historical context something that was going on in periods like this.
Okay, the next classical album is called Transatlantic, and it's by Onyx Brass with John Wilson conducting, released on the Chandos label on June 27th. So I'm getting closer to the modern day here. The core members of the Onyx Brass Quintet are Niall Keatley and Alan Thomas on trumpet, Andrew Sutton on horn, Amos Miller on tenor trombone, and David Gordon Shute on tuba. And I gotta tell you, David Gordon Shute makes a big impression on this album. That tuba,
he does,
really is right up front. It sounds great, as does everybody else. But I like the tuba, so I singled that out. The album combines pieces for the core quintet of Onyx Brass with pieces for extended brass forces, plus piano in the case of Florence Price's octet for brasses and piano. Yeah, we're going to hear another Florence Price work. Okay, we start off with a piece by William Walton, British composer, called Roaring Fanfare from 1976. It was composed for the entrance of the Queen at a reception marking the 150th anniversary of the Zoological Society of London in 1976. It's very brief and inspiring, and it's even got some fun downward glissandos in the brass. The Onyx Brass are a tight-sounding ensemble. Melodic edges are kept sharp and pointed. Track 2 is rather an unusual track to have so early in the program. American composer John Adams's China Gates for piano, arranged for brass quintet here by David Gordon Shute, the tubaist, or the tubist, I guess you could say. The title is based on a harmonic device that Adams calls gating. A gate is a point in the music at which the prevailing harmony shifts into a new underlying chord. Each time this happens in this arrangement, it's marked by the tuba, so keep an ear out for that. We last heard this work for piano on Danil Trifonov's most recent album, My American Story, North. The piece sounds very quietly here. It sort of does on Trifonov's album too. But here, the patterns are carefully articulated and neatly lined up in their individual rhythms. and this is due to the different timbres of the instruments. The piece very gradually crescendos in this arrangement, and for the purposes of this podcast, we'll have to sample something near the end. So let's do that. Okay, you get the idea. It's interesting to hear all of the lines played by different instruments. They stand out more than they do on the piano, where they create this big blend of sound and rhythm. To be honest, though, I think this works better on the piano. I think the whole blend of sound really serves it a lot better. But this was very interesting. Track 3, Benjamin Britten, Funeral March, written in 1938 and completed in 2022 by Bernard Hughes. Britten started this in 1938 but never finished it. Bernard Hughes, author of the booklet note for this release, was invited by Onyx Brass to prepare a completion. I like the quiet, gauzy chords at the opening, sounding as if from afar. The brass have more of a matte finish in their timbre in this work. At 1 minute and 22 seconds, a distant trudge starts in the bass drum as the brass play a somber, downward theme. And then this crescendos. Let's hear a little bit of it. The piece reaches a forte, suggesting the procession is passing directly in front of us, and the work then decrescendos, moving back into the distance. Tracks 4 through 6, Florence Price, Octet for brasses and piano, from the year 1930, and Viv McLean is the pianist in this work. This is one of the rediscovered works found in the Cache of Scores in 2009 in Florence Price's abandoned summer home. The fourth track on the album is the first movement, Tempo Moderato. Now, we've become familiar with Florence Price's bluesy Americana-based sound, and it comes across as particularly pleasing in a brass setting. The piano is lightly Gershwin-esque. Let's hear a little bit of this. And we're off on another inspiring melody there. This movement has a bit of a dusky feel to it in its moderate tempo. There's a big crescendo at the end, brightening the overall sound, bringing the movement to a fairly big ending. Track 5 is the second movement, Andante Cantabile, with much expression. The brass play the soulful melody over the piano's chords. The theme remains light and is wistfully played until the piano comes in for a solo passage at 1 minute and 35 seconds. I'm going to sample a bit past that, though. Let's hear from around the 2-minute mark. we'll leave it at that. Brass are back in afterwards and take most of the slow, gospel-y melody to the end of the movement. And then track 6 is the third and final movement, Tempo Moderato. This bursts out triumphantly and features some elements of jazz harmony of the time, so sort of like a pop music tune of the time. At 1 minute and 30 seconds is a bit of a fanfare in the brass, taken up by the piano too, and sequenced into a movement to a new key area. The movement itself is taken at the moderato tempo indicated, but sounds on the slow side, loosening harmonic tension build up a bit. It's an immediately appealing work. Tracks 7 through 9, Malcolm Arnold, British composer. Quintet number 1 for 2 trumpets, horn, trombone, and tuba, Opus 73, composed in 1961. Now, Arnold started his career as a trumpeter, and I guess after hearing this work, that's not so surprising. He separates the brass really well in this work. I really liked this. Track 7, the first movement, is marked Allegro Vivace. This starts in an energetic mood with fanfare-like roulades, which the bass instruments answer with appealing tone. It's great to hear some of these harmonies played by brass. You generally don't hear them in jazz when we normally hear brass instruments. The sound of the tuba in this work is fantastic, and he gets a solo in the first minute. Let's hear a bit of that, because I just love the tuba. I really love how independent each voice sounds in this piece. We get into something of a more early century popular music vein in the second minute, like something from a Fellini film. The piece returns to its cheerful opening as it reaches its end. Track 8 is the second middle movement, Chaconne andante con moto. This almost sounds like it's setting a tragic scene for a film at the opening. The quintet's setting for this work makes all of the instruments stand out, and Arnold's writing gives them all a unique role to play as the movement unfolds. The trombone especially gets some dramatic moments, as it does here. The tuba then follows with rising lines. We heard the beginning of that. There's a dramatic outburst at the 3 minute and 45 second mark or so, underlined by a blaring tuba. The work then moves back into its wispy opening harmonic profile to have the work drift off to its ending. Track 9 is the third and final movement, Con Brio. The trumpets get the leading fanfares at the opening of the movement, but I really enjoyed the rapid figures beneath them. This is some impressive playing, and by the end of the sample, even has some jazzy inflections. Let's hear a little bit of this. You can hear those sort of jazzy syncopations as I fade out. The opening material returns for the rousing ending. This is a fun work. It's a light discovery and one for brass players especially to hear. Track 10, George Gershwin, Novelette in Fourths, Prelude for Piano from 1919, arranged for brass quintet by Timothy Jackson. This is a cakewalk and was originally composed for solo piano. Gershwin recorded a piano roll of it and later arranged it for violin and piano. The bluesy element of the score comes across strongly, as it did in the Florence Price work we heard earlier, but we miss the percussive quality of the piano here, I think. So buttery do the brass instruments sound. Still, they sway appealingly to the rhythm, and the melodies throughout are inventive and, of course, extremely catchy. Let's hear a little bit of it. Track 11, Benjamin Britten, a fanfare for June 30th, 1970, for 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, and 2 tubas. So what's so special about June 30th, 1970? Well, it was the farewell gala for Sir David Webster, the retiring chief executive of the Royal Opera House. The work has never been published or recorded, nor had it ever been heard in public till Onyx Brass unveiled it at the 2025 Aldeburgh Festival. Britten has included scraps of 9 of Sir David's favorite operatic tunes in the score. Britten didn't write much for brass, but he apparently likes the distant sound they can get, because, like the funeral march we heard earlier, this one starts quietly and at a distance, with some scintillating polyphonic lines appearing at times within the smooth harmony. At 1 minute and 20 seconds, the music suddenly brightens with a lively fanfaric outburst from the trumpets. There's a run-through of everything we've heard, ending with a fanfare. Tracks 12 through 14, Gordon Langford, British composer, lived 1930 to 2017. Prelude, Polonaise, and Promenade for brass quintet. Langford was primarily known for his works for brass band. Track 12 is the Prelude, marked Allegro. The work starts with a fanfare-like call, followed by a quieter response. Let's hear that. Some crafty orchestration in there. Langford has a way with melody, it seems, as an attractive one comes after this section in the trumpet, with a mobile tuba playing bass underneath. The movement seems to rely structurally on a 3-note staccato figure that returns often. Track 13, Polonaise, con moto. A very clear fanfare starts this movement. The figure repeats in all ranges. A new theme is heard after this opening section, but the fanfares come back in what seems to be more or less an ABA movement. It's catchy and appealing. Track 14 is the Promenade, Allegro moderato. The tuba plays a big role at the opening, its presence felt as the trumpet plays the theme. I liked this section where all the instruments get a solo line. The light and rather humorous mood continues throughout this short movement. Track 15, Ralph Vaughan Williams, or some people will say it, Rafe Vaughan Williams. Flourish on the Morris Call, 1935, for trumpets or cornets, horns, trombones, side drum, and cymbals. It's a lot of instruments for a very brief work. This was edited and arranged for symphonic brass by Christopher Gordan. It was written for the International Folk Dance Festival at the Royal Albert Hall in London in July 1935, where it was played by the Morris Motors Band. I had to check Grok for this, AI helping me out here. The Morris call refers to a musical motif associated with Morris dancing, a traditional English folk dance. This is like looking up a word in the dictionary where the word you're looking for is part of the definition, so you still don't know what it means. The flourish itself is pretty bold sounding and also brief. All we really get is the flourish here, well executed by the ensemble. Track 16 through 20, Joseph Horowitz, lived 1926 to 2022. Music Hall Suite for Brass Quintet. The 5 movements explore various aspects of burlesque theater, circus, and cabaret. Track 16 is the first movement, Soubrette Song, Allegretto. Vaughan Williams' flourish ushers in this more popular music section of the album. Soubrettes are supposed to be lively and flirtatious. It's really a role in an opera, the soubrette role. Here, the mood, though, seems a bit down due to the music, really, not the ensemble. There's a wry face to the rhythm and smeary-sounding tone given to the piece. I guess it could come across as flirtatious. Judge for yourself. Track 17 is the second movement, Trick Cyclists, Vivace. Given the title, we should get something circusy, and we do. The movement has a popular music feel to it. It continues in this vein for its short duration. Track 18, the third movement, Adagio and Team, Lento Moderato. I don't really know what that team means here, but the movement has a melancholy sound in the melody and rhythm, and it sounds like a sad song. Its melodic appeal continues throughout. Track 19, the fourth movement, Soft Shoe Shuffle, Moderato ma giocoso, moving to a coda. This has a more comical and even wry profile with its off-kilter syncopations in the rhythm and the tone given the angular-sounding melody. It's a fun movement. Let's hear a little bit of it. Track 20, the fifth movement, Le Girl, Allegro vivace ma comodo. The rhythm at the opening is again circusy, sort of the thing you'd hear when someone's juggling. The melody is really defined by the rhythm. And tracks 21 through 25 is a work by Leonard Bernstein, Dance Suite for Brass Quintet, written for the Empire Brass Quintet. And he wrote this in 1989 to 1990. It was his last composition. Track 21, the first movement, Dansisca, for Anthony Tudor, Vivo Celebrante. The title alludes to Bernstein's granddaughter, Francisca, so I guess it's Dansisca, for whom the piece was originally composed, to be played on the piano. It begins with a dancing, fanfaric figure that's very appealing. Let's hear it. That's about half the piece right there. These are all very brief. There's some interesting orchestration in there by Bernstein, who had an ear for the timbres produced by brass instruments. He had a good ear for jazz as well. Track 22, the second movement, Waltz for Agnes de Mille. Tempo di valse, leggero. Agnes de Mille was Cecil B. DeMille's niece. This is slow and also a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's got an appealing rhythm and is also over before you know it. Track 23, the third movement, By Tango. For Misha, Mikhail Baryshnikov, that is. Allegretto grazioso. This explores bitonality. It's only 30 seconds long. It's got an interesting Stravinskyan rhythm with a harmonized melody played over it. Track 24, the fourth movement, two-step for Mr. B, who is George Balanchine. Allegretto leggermente. The attack treads carefully in this work. It keeps rather quiet for its 30 or so seconds. And then we get to track 25, the fifth movement and final movement, MTV for Jerry. And that Jerry is Jerome Robbins, the choreographer for West Side Story. It's marked cool, and then doppio più presto, and then driving, and even cooler. The tunes of West Side Story are hinted in this work due to the fact that it's, for Jerome Robbins. You can hear traces of West Side Story right from the beginning. Let's see if you can pull them out. Then we get into some serious rhythm there, and a little more of a West Side Story reference. Mutes then go into the trumpets. We hear a tune that really moves, played over a hot rock rhythm. This suddenly stops, and something more Gershwin-esque and romantic is heard in the muted trumpets. The piece ends rather unexpectedly on an upward move, and that's the end of the album. We don't get enough all-brass albums in classical music, and when we do, they tend to be for Christmas, or consist of 3-minute single-movement works. We get some of those here, but this album is noteworthy for its variety. The shorter works wind up being interludes between the more involved multi-movement works, and there's some real gems on this recording, like the Malcolm Arnold Quintet, which I especially took to, and the Florence Price Octet. I thought the Gordon Langford work was a discovery as well. Sound is closely recorded and richly captured throughout, except in works that call for a distant sound, like the Britten Funeral March. There are a number of fanfares on the album, as you'd expect. I'm not entirely sure the Adams arrangement worked, but I found it interesting to hear that work in this context. This is an unmissable album for brass players, and the Malcolm Arnold and Florence Price works are ripe for discovery by a wider audience.
Yeah, great brass playing and an excellent British-American program here. Just going through some of my notes from the longer works. Well, to start with the Adams, as you said, was kind of an interesting way to hear this since we heard it kind of recently on piano. But yeah, the unique nature of the brass timbres made this kind of a new experience. So I was interested in that. The Price work was really interesting to hear with brass. It brought some new colors to the music, and you had the piano in there as well. And you could hear the Gershwin influence, but still something of her own character in the composition. And so I was glad to have that piece recorded. The Arnold work was really full of exciting rhythmic lines and very technically impressive, especially the last movement. And I found that whole work really exciting. The Langford was really well written. Great parts for all the instruments, especially the tuba stood out in that. And the Horowitz was really a lot of fun too. And I thought the whole thing was a great showpiece, really fun and stylistic writing. And the Bernstein was full of these short little movements, but they were all fun. And you had that kind of fun ending piece as well. So a lot of variety. All the works are melodic enough to be instantly enjoyable, but they all have some surprises and challenges on the way for the listener. Great brass playing. As you said, we should hear more recordings like this.
Yeah, use this as a model. It's great. I want to hear more multi-movement brass quintet works. They're out there. They just don't get recorded all that often. Okay, our final classical recording of the evening is the quasi, in this case, contemporary one. We have all 20th century composers and a few are 21st century. This is an album of clarinet concertos played by Peter Cigleris on the clarinet and Györ Symphonic Band. They are based in Hungary. That's a Hungarian name. This is on the Somm Recordings label, SOMM, and this also was released on that magic date of June 20th, 2025. Just can't get away from that. I'm ready for the summer here. Let's go. Anyway, yeah, that was just a few days before, the day before summer, all those came out. So we have 4 composers on this album all from different countries. The first is Frigyes Hidas. He was Hungarian and lived 1928 to 2007. This is his Concerto Semplice, or Simple Concerto. In this case, Ferenc Szabó is the conductor. There are 2 conductors on the album. Now, Hidas is little known outside of Hungary, though he had some success in the U.S., where he was commissioned to write a significant number of orchestral works. This work, as the title suggests, is written in a direct, almost classical tonal language. Generally, the clarinet leads and the orchestra follows. The work was originally written for clarinet and string orchestra, but in 1996, Hidas was prevailed upon to write this revision for wind orchestra, and that's what we hear here. Track 1 is the first movement of this 3-movement work, Allegro Giocoso. The chirpy opening immediately establishes a pleasant mood. Let's hear it. Now, that might surprise you that that's a 20th century work, but it is. It's so melodic and chirpy and fun, but it does have a 20th century kind of feel to it as well in the harmony. It's so endearing, though, that it draws you in immediately. Cigleris' playing is inviting as well, phrases tightly taken, then loosened for the flowing second theme. Great contrast in the playing here to draw out the contrast in the score. The second theme starts at about the 1 minute and 20 second mark, and the second theme's mood hangs around for a while, and the orchestral strings add a dusky atmosphere. Cigleris has some impressively virtuosic lines in the middle section, which he dispatches with ease and full expressive color. His playing is highly inviting, as I've said, but I'm continually drawn to it. The movement basically unfolds like a sonata, except that the opening theme returns at the end, with the opening theme coming last, so it's a mirror of the order they were heard in the movement's opening. Track 2, the second movement, Sostenuto. It's vocally expressive. The solo clarinet sounds in a distant piano dynamic at the opening, piano meaning soft in this case, not the instrument. It slowly approaches as it suddenly crescendos as the winds come in to accompany. All is melodic in this movement. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the clarinet emerges solo again, for a searching lyrical section. You could think of it as a melodic cadenza. It gives us an opportunity to hear some of the variety in Cigleris' tone. So let's sample that. At 5 minutes and 35 seconds, the solo section ends and we hear the gorgeous dusky orchestral theme on its own for a moment. It's nicely orchestrated with winds. Be sure to keep an ear out for that. The clarinet states the opening theme and the movement ends. Track 3 is the final movement, Allegro. It's in 9/8 and it's all smiles. it starts with a quick staccato clarinet line. The clarinet, after an orchestral statement, goes up into its high end for a jaunty theme. In fact, jaunty is a good word to describe this movement, as you will hear in this sample. The first section ends with an emphatic tonic chord at around the 1 minute and 35-second mark. Then a new, equally chirpy section begins, with the clarinet more legato and accompanied by some gorgeous low brass chords. The movement has a brief solo section for the clarinet at the end that leads back to the opening theme. It's stated, and the concerto comes to an end on a crescendoed chord. It's a fun piece all around, worth hearing in full. A really delightful discovery, really. Tracks 4 through 6, Simon Milton, British composer, born in 1977, so he's a contemporary composer. His clarinet concerto. This one features László Marosi as conductor. Track 4 is the first movement, Fragments with Cadenza. The movement starts as distant fragments, moving suddenly from one idea to another. They're all easy on the ear, though. The clarinet comes in with its theme, which includes some slides from one note to the next. Percussion enter into the next fragmental section in the orchestra, sounding a bit like Stravinsky's writing for brass and percussion, probably due to the fragmental nature. The movement doesn't come across as Stravinskyan, though. It's got a different fingerprint in each section. Let's hear a little bit of this work. And then we get into a little bit of a cadenza there. The percussion really pound in this performance and are well captured on the recording. After the sample, the clarinet goes into a knotty cadenza, ending its lines up high in its range. Some impressive quick staccato technique by Cigleris here. And always within the shaping of the phrase, which comes first for him, obviously, and I personally am glad it does. Percussive dripping sounds come in as an accompaniment at one point. Those light percussive sounds continue to the end of the movement, changing subtly. There's appealing orchestration in the winds and brass at the end, which comes as an interruption to the continuing line. Track 5 is the second movement, Ecstasy, moderately and expressively. This starts distantly too, with the clarinet and winds interweaving within the harmony. Milton gets some interesting brass harmony in this piece. Timpani brings some drama to the movement. There's an odd swaying dance melody that comes out of this at about the 1 minute and 30-second mark, and I will sample that. This is another movement with some quick, unexpected changes. Milton is a resourceful composer who makes his movements morph in unexpected ways into further unexpected settings. I like the steady quarter note tapping rhythm that underpins the more hysterical clarinet line high above it. This ends and we get the wispy sounds we heard at the opening again. This movement also ends with a suspension of the musical activity. Track 6 is the third movement, Finale, with humor. The opening has percussive quarter note sounds that we heard in the previous movement, but here the clarinet's line is more playful. The tempo is rather moderate. Let's hear a little bit of this. The clarinet gets a solo spot mid-movement, after which the percussion is back. The clarinet is back in for a quick line at the ending with some arabesques over pounding chords in the orchestra. There's a light rush to the ending, and the piece crescendos to an ending that doesn't quite provide resolution. It ends like a Stravinsky work, just a sudden last statement that's not a tonic chord. Tracks 7 through 8 is a work by David Maslanka, an American composer who lived 1943 to 2017. His clarinet concerto, and this one features László Marosi as the conductor. Maslanka claims that with the advent of instant communication and information, we are at last beginning to see and understand the human race as one entity. This huge shift requires intense dream time, he says, especially conscious dream time. And music powerfully opens this dream space. Oh, no wonder why I'm always daydreaming, because it's the change around me. Okay, track 7, the first movement, Lamentation. A deep mourning as in mourning for the dead. As we view our personal troubles and the troubles of the world, the movement opens quietly with a very distant atmospheric sound and what sounds like a marimba playing quick figures. There's a melody on a wind instrument in the back. Then the clarinet enters with a crescendo from silence on a single note at the 1 minute mark. The tempo is slow and the pacing leaves a lot of space as the lament slowly builds up. Maslanka is another composer with an ear for interesting orchestration. Low brass and winds have a fantastic sound underpinning musical events in the higher end. The dynamic stays in the quiet end for most of the movement. Here's a more melodic section of the score, which will give you an idea of the spaciousness of the material. It's very gentle and soothing throughout. There is a sudden crescendo in the 7th minute to a bolder theme with a sense of striding forward to it. This all emerges into a more hopeful yet somber theme at the end of the 8th minute. The music quietens then, and the opening texture returns in the 10th minute. The movement ends quietly, seemingly on a question. There's no sense of closure. Track 8 is the second and final movement, Dance. A springing leap into the new world, the composer says. This is a completely different feel. The accompaniment presents a rushing rhythm, which the clarinet melodizes over. There's some creative use of light percussion under the clarinet here, seemingly a theme on this album. Other works used percussion as well. I rather liked this modal theme near the beginning of the movement. This theme leads to a crescendo where it's repeated forte with percussion booming below. A bold accented statement follows in the orchestra. A quick section follows with some energy. Then at 5 minutes and 40 seconds, the clarinet emerges in a cadenza, which gains in energy with each new line. The cadenza ends moving into a gentle section accompanied by a light, slowly moving harp arpeggio, like the feather-light clarinet here is being gently fanned by the accompaniment. It sounds like a period of respite. There's eventually a crescendo that brings us back into the opening, rushing rhythm. The theme breaks up and crescendos into the bolder theme that followed at the opening. This music apparently represents the brave new world we emerge into. Maslanka sounds positive about the future. The theme ends in a new, higher key. The music suddenly pulls back so that the clarinet can play a brief theme of quiet gratitude over light piano figures. And the final work on the album is a one-movement work, track 9, by the Japanese composer Satoshi Yagisawa. He was born in 1975, so he's a contemporary composer. This is also called Clarinet Concerto, and it's marked Allegro, moving to Intermezzo, Adagio, and then on to Vivacissimo. This features Ferenc Szabó as the conductor. Yagisawa is noteworthy for his music for wind instruments. There's a quick chord at the beginning and a clarinet line that descends to a resolution. It starts climbing and rhapsodizing a bit after that in cadenza-like fashion. A noble theme in the orchestra follows, played by winds and brass. The clarinet leaps out of this with a sprightly theme, a complete contrast to the nobility we've just heard. Yagisawa has the clarinet's phrases resolving completely. It sounds unusual if you listen to modern music often, meaning modern classical music. The clarinet and orchestra then begin interacting, with the clarinet leading and providing new material that the orchestra reacts to. The piece is lyrical throughout, with some fine melodic playing, and with some extended techniques included. The orchestra draws the clarinet out of this cadenza with sustained chords that the clarinet solos over. A new theme emerges at 5 minutes and 40 seconds, and let's hear that. The orchestra takes up the clarinet's theme after the clarinet plays it through. The clarinet gets another solo passage at 9 minutes. This one is somber and brief. The orchestra returns with a familiar theme from earlier on, played quietly. A new theme is heard at 11 minutes and 30 seconds, this one happier and with percussion. I want to sample this one too. Here we go. And we get so many cadences in this work. It's so unusual in a modern work. It's just great to hear, too, and it works really well. A flight of the bumblebee-type passage is played by the clarinet in the 13th minute within this emphatic accompaniment. The clarinet plays alone again, somberly, in the 15th minute, a complete contrast to what he's following. There's a rhapsody in blue-like glissando in the texture. A more dancing melody ends the section, and winds join in for a final cheerful surge to the end of the concerto. This is an album of 4 clarinet concertos that prove to be enjoyable discoveries. All 4 works are melodic and more or less aim to please, and that they do. Cigleris is a versatile soloist, changing expression quickly to draw contrast out of the sections of the works. He has an appealing tone that he can slightly alter for expressive purposes. He zeroes in on what's appealing about these works and draws it out so that the listener can comprehend and enjoy these works on a first listen. They're all highly melodic and appealing, even light in the case of Hidas. Another thing all four of these composers have in common is a way with orchestration that compels the ear and foregrounds the clarinet in interesting ways. It's a pretty long album, with 4 concertos by different composers adding up to 80 minutes of music, but the contrast and variety in the works and in the orchestration within all 4 keep the ear interested throughout. It's an album to enjoy.
I said similar things as you. These were all enjoyable works and really balance excitement of the symphonic band with the clarinet parts. The Hidas was the most traditional and melodic sounding. The clarinet part writing is really great with a sense of freedom. The Milton has more modern and dense harmonies, exciting percussion and brass, and it's very mercurial. The Maslanka had interesting instrumentation. I liked the beginning, and that was vibes there, not marimba. They really ring out.
I was wondering about it because I heard a marimba later, I thought.
Could be.
I was kind of listening to that sustain. I was saying.
Yeah, the sustain was really important in that. Just interesting instrumentation. And the Yagisawa was a lot of fun with constant new surprises of ideas, playful techniques in the cadenza parts, and thrilling percussion. And through it all, Cigleris shows great technique and a liquid, pleasing tone. I really enjoyed the symphonic band arranging on this recording, and it made me want to hear more concertos with winds backing. I just really found the winds really uplifting on this recording.
Well, do I have a surprise for you in about 2 weeks?
Oh, great.
We'll talk about it then.
Okay, over to the jazz side, and we're going to start out in Norway with the Agnar Aspaas Quintet, a bass-led recording. It's called November Songs. It came out July 11th. Our leader is bassist Agnar Aspaas, and he's got all original compositions here. We've got all these Norwegian names, which are hard to pronounce for English speakers, and a lot of them have 2 last names, too. I'm not sure if they use both of them all the time. I'll do my best to put them together and try to pronounce them so they're understandable here. On the piano, Magne Arnesen, who's played with Aspaas for more than 20 years. On the trumpet, we've got Magnus Onested Oseth. On tenor sax, Erlend Vangen Konstorp. And on the drums, Magnus Stefaniussen Ida. This was recorded March 31st and April 1st and mixed in April by Leif Johansen at Newtone Studio in Oslo, Norway. It's produced by Agnar Aspaas, and executive producer is Ode Yelsnes. The recording notes for the program have a quote from Aspaas. Quote, "This album consists of my own compositions from over 40 years and reflects inspiration from American post-war jazz. Over the years, I've been content to be a sideman for leading Norwegian musicians, and my own songs have long remained tucked away in a desk drawer. But now, at a mature age, I've gathered the courage to assemble a team made up of 3 generations of Norwegian musicians. The title and track of that name refer to the idea as well." End of quote. So I guess the theme is autumn years, so to speak. And several tunes on the recording, Little K, T&T, Joe, Johnny, June, and Sunny Boys all refer to his grandchildren. That's very nice. The recording starts out with T&T, a relaxed, easy-swinging tune. It's in an AABA 32-measure form. The horns have a 2-note pickup to the A section with warm unison tones and a reliable chug from Aspaas below. Let's hear it get started. bass section of the tune there. Onyx Oseth solos first on trumpet. He's lyrical and has nice melodic ideas. This whole tune has kind of a West Coast vibe going on. Vangan Kontor follows with a warm-toned tenor sax solo, and then Arneson on piano. And Aspaas takes the last solo on bass, so let's hear from our composer and leader on this first tune. Deep tone and little slides with good melodic direction in that solo there, and once more around the melody closes it out. Track 2 is Sunny Boys. A 4-measure intro with one-note bass brings it to a sunny 24-measure melody. There's a nice horn arrangement with horns starting in unison, then splitting off into different lines and spots. Aspaas has a steady bass walk, keeping it buoyant, and Vangan Kontorp is up first for a tenor sax solo. Smooth-toned sax. Let's come back in to hear some of Onyx Oseth's trumpet solo on this one. Mixing in some double-time licks, but still keeping a good laid-back feel. Arneson gets a piano solo too, with a light but snappy touch, and trades some fours with Stephanius and Hidas drums before they get back to the melody. Track 3 is The November Song. Arneson starts this ballad out with a solo rubato piano opening. Onyx Oseth starts out the melody on the trumpet for the first 8-measure section, then it's over to Vangan Kontorp for the next section, and both horns are together on the last part. Let's hear it get going. Aspaas solos first and really makes the bass sing out. Let's take a listen to some of his playing too. Arneson has a pretty piano solo on this one too, before the horns return with the melody. Track 4 is Joe Johnny June. This one has a samba feel. After an 8-measure intro, there's a long 52-measure horn melody. Has a slinky and smooth sax solo, and Onestad Oseth has a trumpet solo with lines building higher and higher. Let's check out Arneson's piano solo on this one. Climax there with percussive chords, and the horns are back for a final time through the melody. Track 5 is Q's-Land, a 6/8 feel here traced out in Stephanius and Hidas cymbals, a 22-measure horn melody that has a nice bounce in the harmonized lines. Let's take a listen. Onstedt Åseth is up first from there with a trumpet solo, followed by Vangen Kongtorp on sax, and Arneson has a piano solo as well. Track 6 is called Fat Boy, and the notes say it's a greeting to everyone who was picked last for the dodgeball team. This has a long 64-measure melody, with the final 16 measures the same as the opening. Midway through, Aspaas switches up his mostly half-note bass lines to walking lines that really give it a push forward. Let's hear some of Vangen Kongtorp's sax solo on this one, from where Aspaas gets the bass chugging along again. Åseth has a trumpet solo next, stitching together ideas of shorter lines before getting a bass boost, and Aspaas and Arneson both get solos too, and the tune finishes up with the second half of the horn melody. Now tracks 7 and 8 are called Thai Song 1 and Thai Song 2. The notes say they're the oldest of the compositions, and Aspaas says they came about after he watched a harrowing documentary from Thailand about the abuse of young girls. He sat down at the piano and suddenly the themes were there. A dark inspiration, but you never know where music can come from. In Thai Song 1, even half-note piano and bass chords go around an 8-measure cycle for an intro. Onstedt Åseth has the harmon mute in for the first section of the melody, and then hands it off to Vangen Kongtorp's sax. At this slow tempo, we can just hear it get started. Both horns have wispy solos on this one, and Arneson shows off a delicate touch on piano. The horns are back for the ending sections of the melody. Track 8, Thai Song 2, Symphonic and Hidas starts things out with a funky brushed drum beat. Bass and piano join the groove. The melody's interesting. It's like a minor blues, but 11 measures instead of the expected 12 bars. Check it out. Wagenkontorp's up first for a sax solo. Let's check out Onyx's trumpet solo on this one. Gordan nicely picks up on his final idea there into a piano solo, and Stephanius and Ida gets a subtle drum solo into a final round of the melody with a curious rubato coda ending. Track 9 is Little K, a waltz with easy flowing harmonized horn lines on a 28-measure melody. Solos first on tenor sax, and Arneson gets a piano solo with backing horns. Aspaas gets the last solo on bass, and the horns are back to an unresolved ending. Track 10 is Sideman, about his own life as a musician. This is pretty cool. Stephanius and Ida gets it started with a drum fill. The melody is in an AABA 32-measure shape with a 6-beat feel. Sax and bass started out with unpredictable slinking lines that give a Latin impression. Piano is in on the next round, and trumpet from the contrasting B section. Let's check it out. Arneson's piano solo is really classy on this tune, so let's continue on listening to that. horns trade off improvised lines on this one before a final time through the fun melody. And the recording ends up with track 11, Late Bloomer, and Aspaas' notes say it's dedicated to trumpeter Erik Halvorsen, who with his CD releases later in life was an important inspiration for me to do the same. This is a happy samba kind of feel to hear. Symphonic Ida makes a fun 8-measure intro on drums, and the melody is a cheerful 64-measure interplay of horns and piano. Arneson's up first for an animated piano solo, and both horns get solos before a half-size final melody section with fun drum fills finishes it up. It's a program of original tunes from Aspaas that evokes swinging and cool jazz of the 50s and 60s. The melodies are mostly joyful and are sure to put you in a good mood. Lots of swinging and some samba too. There's time for ballads and the interesting Thai songs too. Aspaas' bass is warm and authoritative, driving things from the bottom, and his solos are very melodic. Arneson is a sophisticated pianist with a classy sense and nice touch, and Symphonic Ida gets lots of tasty drum work with a variety of meters and feels. Wangenkongtrop's sax tone is full and smooth with lyrical solos throughout, and Onestadoseth's trumpet solos have good phrasing and a relaxed musicality that matches the mood. November songs will sound fine in any season.
That's a good ending line there. Yeah, November did kind of put me in that kind of November mood, like winter's on its way, it's getting colder. It's kind of an ideal late night listen. I ordinarily wouldn't go out on a November night, unless I was invited or something. Stay home by the fire, This album, like you said, might make you even return to a mellower night in the 1950s or 1960s, or even the early 1970s, I said. The album is rich sounding, really due to the arrangements. Yeah. So really good arranging on this album, too. With the bass adding upholstery for the piano, sound on tracks like Thai Song 1, which I thought was really nice. The tunes have a lot of romance in them, especially in tracks like Little K. This album really did remind me of music that was around when I was a kid. That's why I said the 1970s. The stuff that would accompany like leisure suits, not the funky stuff, the other ones. It's well done. The band will have a sense of melody, and that carries the listener through. It's a comfortable listen all the way through. Very well done. Very soothing. I liked it a lot.
Nice jazz from Norway.
Norway's a chilled out place, I guess.
Very chilly.
It's chilly, I guess, yeah.
All right, next we're going to hear from trumpeter Chad McCullough and his new recording Transverse on his own Calligram Records. It came out July 11th. Chicago-based Chad McCullough is co-owner of Calligram Records, and he teaches in the jazz department at DePaul University. He also writes film scores as well as keeping an active international performance schedule. Recently, he toured in 16 countries with the Japanese band Mono as the tour music director. He's made quite a few recording releases, including last year's In These Hills Beyond, and he was recognized as a Rising Star Trumpeter of the Year in the 2025 Downbeat Magazine Critics Poll. Here he's with some Macedonian musicians. So the lineup is Chad McCullough on trumpet and flugelhorn, Kirill Tufikchevsky on acoustic bass, and Viktor Filipovsky on drums. The recording's produced by all of the members, recorded by Vijay Teles Nayak at Transient Sound in Chicago, October 16th, 2024, mixed and mastered by Brian Schwab. From the notes, After meeting 6 years ago in Macedonia, the album's 8 tracks showcase compositions written specifically for this ensemble, combining American jazz sensibilities with Macedonian folk elements in what Spasovski calls a subtle symbiosis between the contemporary jazz sound and the Macedonian folklore rhythms. For McCullough, who has been traveling regularly to Macedonia to perform with these musicians, the recording represents years of developing a symbiotic communicative style between busy professionals from two very different musical scenes. Sounds intriguing. Things get started with the first track, Lake Ohrid Lament, and this is based on a traditional Macedonian folk song that I can't pronounce, which is about a boy from a historic lakeside village of Ohrid, and it's arranged here by Spasovski. The Bandcamp notes say that it alternates between 11/8 and 13/8 time signatures, but you'll have to be a really fast counter if you want to catch that for yourself. And the rippling piano figures that Spasovski starts the intro with. Bass and drums join in, and Tufikchevsky makes a bass line that grooves hypnotically. McCullough adds improvisations on top, and things become more placid for the longing melody handled lyrically by McCullough. Let's hear it get started. There's the piano figure from the beginning back into another round of the melody. McCullough gets a lot of time to develop a solo that keeps a melodic trajectory while still working through a lot of chromatic ideas. Your ears are drawn to the intricate cymbal work of Filipovsky too. Let's check out the ending section. Spasovski has an exciting piano solo here too, and then they vamp on the intro idea for Filipovsky to get some tight and speedy work on the drum kit before a return to the melody and some final piano improvisations from Spasovski that he manages while keeping the left-hand figures going. It's a challenging and interesting opening number. Track 2 is Falling Tide. This is a Chad McCullough original, and it's inspired by tide cycles, according to the notes. It has a 3/4 time feel. There's a sparse 8-measure piano intro, and McCullough plays the melody on flugelhorn. The first section is 32 measures with a tidal rising and falling impression. There's an 8-measure piano interlude, and then another flugelhorn melody section with a new key center as if the tide has risen. Let's hear the first section. Spasovski's piano solo has interesting modal explorations over the changing harmonies. Let's hear some of his playing on this tune. McCullough's flugelhorn solo on this one starts light and fluffy, but becomes more urgent and primal with high cries, though always being musical. He brings it to a soft conclusion, and Filipovsky has a drum solo focusing on interesting tones using a variety of techniques, including his hands. It finishes with a return of the second melody section into some soft final flugel thoughts. Track 3 is a Spasovski original, Across the Deep. The notes say, quote, "The melody and harmony were inspired by the impressionistic classical composers and some of the fathers of the contemporary jazz piano like McCoy Tyner and Kenny Kirkland." Filipovsky's drum work really stands out here with the rhythmic change-ups. The melody lines sometimes snap into quarter note figures over walking bass, giving a charging ahead feel. There's a 16-measure section, a 2-measure interlude, and a similar 16-measure section with a different ending into a final 14-measure section, and then McCullough is off improvising. Let's hear it. And let's hear some more of McCullough's playing on this one. Nice ending there. And Spasovski has a piano solo here too. And after a final melody section, trumpet and piano interact to build up the energy before bringing it down for the ending. Track 4 is by Tofikchevsky, written for his young daughter, for Lenny. This starts out cute and playful. It sounds like it alternates 4-beat and 2-beat measures. Tofikchevsky has a neat loping bass line, and the trumpet and piano unison melody phrases have a topsy-turvy feel. The next section swings in 4/4 over walking bass, and then there's another big change into some free improvisations from McCullough over drums. Let's check out the start. A little bit of half-valve fun and into some free territory. Bass and piano return with some standard backing for McCullough to continue. Spasovski has a piano solo on this one too, with some percussive chords and tremolos that will fit nicely into a 1-minute sample, so let's hear him as well. Back to the melody from there, which goes into the bass and trumpet note exchange to end up the tune. Track 5 is by Chad McCullough, The Forlorn Tale of Tomorrow. This is suite-like in nature with a lot of different sections, so it's hard to capture in samples, and it stretches to 13.5 minutes. The opening is a 16-measure section of the rhythm section with a straight beat feel, focusing on piano figures. There's a harmonic shift and a new bass ostinato for a trumpet melody section next, and then a return of the opening idea. Let's hear it from where the trumpet enters. And it returns to the opening idea from there. Next, Tufekchevsky takes center stage for a bass lead that rings out. Piano takes it to a pause after 3 minutes with a new rubato solo piano section, then a new trumpet melody theme into improvised piano, and then more trumpet melody. Bass flutters lead to a new section where Filipovsky does some drum skittering. There's a return to the opening idea, and then a new trumpet section into improvisations from McCullough. Let's sample some of his playing that works up way high on the horn. Spasovski works up some percussive piano energy and then brings it down to a quiet ending. And you really need to hear this whole tune to get an idea of everything going on and how it's connected. Track 6, Manu Casus, or Latin for By Chance. This is an original by Spasovski. And the note say it was coincidentally written on McCullough's birthday and recorded on Spasovski's, something they didn't realize until after. This starts out with a relaxed feel, although the melody phrases have a little skip in them that threatens to burst ahead. After a drum fill, the time doubles up from the 13th measure, and things are really swinging along into improvisations from McCullough before it downshifts again. Let's check it out. McCullough continues on, improvising over the continued rhythmic change-ups, and Spasovski has a piano solo on this one too that surfs the changing feels. Let's hear a little bit of that. And it comes down quietly from there for a final melody section to begin. Track 7 is a McCullough original, Twist, a slow one for flugelhorn over interesting tom tones from Filipovsky. It has a basic 4-beat feel that starts to lull you and then switches up the meter. Let's hear it get started. McCullough continues on with improvisations after the melody that reach up high. Let's hear the climax of those lines. Spasovski has a piano solo too, before a final melody section and a placid ending. And the recording ends up with a final Chad McCullough original, Real and Unreal, which is inspired by American author Ursula K. Le Guin's collection of short stories, The Unreal and the Real, published in 2012. Slow and straight, there's a 10-measure rhythm section introduction, which is the length of the melody phrase. Let's jump in from McCullough's attractive melody for this one from a little ways into the tune. Tufekchevsky is up for an improvised bass solo with some neat sliding ideas, so let's check out some more of his playing. Spasovski has a delicate and smooth-lined solo, and McCullough restates the theme and finishes with melodic improvisations. It's an interesting and satisfying recording. McCullough and his Macedonian mates bring a lot of influences together in a program of all original compositions. Even when things are harmonically dense and rhythmically tricky, there's always a melodic pathway through the tunes, which matches McCullough's lyrical style of playing. His improvisations have a searching quality and often reach into the high register. The distinctive personality of the musicians comes through with technically and musically impressive playing by Spasovski on piano, a unique drum concept and use of tones by Filipkovsky, and all-around tight bass playing by Tufekchevsky. There's a nice balance of adventurous and beautiful moments on this recording.
Yeah, I thought so too. There's also some classical technique in the piano on this album, I noticed, especially right at the opening. You heard those arpeggios, and I thought classical right away. We hear a lot of classical figuration in Gordan Spasovski's playing, along with all the straight jazz chords as well. He creates an appealing, quiet atmosphere in most of the tracks. Chad McCullough brings some stylish tone on the flugelhorn, an instrument I like hearing. The tracks include a lot of unusual structural ideas, such as the fast-slow on Manu Casus and the full stops on the Forlorn Tale of Tomorrow. The band has brought some creativity to the arrangements. The vibe is mostly late-night calm, and tempos are generally on the slow side, with some quicker moments for contrast. It's a chilled-out record, and a calming listen for the most part.
Yeah, very lyrical. All right, and finally, it's time for some big band. I haven't had a big band album in the program in a while.
It's been a while.
And this one's pretty exciting. This is John Yao and his 17-piece instrument with Points in Time on C-Tau Recordings. Came out July 11th. Trombonist, composer, arranger, and bandleader John Yao has been active for 20 years in New York. He has 5 recordings as a leader, and this is the follow-up 10 years later to Flip Flop, the 2015 recording by this ensemble. He performs with a co-led sextet with trumpeter Jimmy Smith and a 3-horn quartet, Triceratops. The Bandcamp notes say, quote, Yao culled favorite tunes from throughout his discography, revising small band compositions in vibrant new big band arrangements. He also showcases the new pieces he's penned over the intervening years, including works premiered during the Big Band and Beyond concert series that this ensemble hosted at Greenwich House Music School in the wake of Flip Flop's release. Some of the tunes here reflect his experience of meeting his wife, going through her overcoming cancer, and then the birth of his son, Nolan. Why did it take 10 years for this album to come out? Quote, the funny thing about recording a big band album is that it makes you want to never do it again. Yeah, says, even though every note somehow feels worth the struggle, he says. After the first album, I was burned out from pushing that boulder up the hill. Well, big band arranging takes a lot of time, and he's put a lot of effort into the arrangements on this recording. Let's go through the cast here. John Yao on trombone and all compositions except for the final tune, which is a Herbie Hancock composition. The sax section, Billy Drews on alto and soprano sax, Hashem Asadullahi alto sax, Rich Perry on tenor sax, Tim Armacost on tenor sax, and Carl Maraghi on baritone sax. Trumpets and flugelhorn, Nick Marchione, John Lake, David Neves, and David Smith. Trombones, Matt McDonald, Nick Vianas, Sam Blakesley, and Max Siegel. I think he's on the bass trombone. Rhythm section, Hyuna Park on piano, Robert Sabin on bass, Andy Watson on drums. This was recorded at Octaven Studios, Mount Vernon, New York, February 12th and 13th, 2024, engineered by Ryan Straber. Mixed by Brian Montgomery, mastered by Fred Kevorkian at Kevorkian Mastering. Produced by John Yao and Mike Holliber, production assistant Joseph Herbst. The recording gets underway with Upside. And this and the final tune, Herbie Hancock's Finger Painting, are updates of compositions and arrangements that were commissioned for high school bands from Yao. Now, this whole recording will be hard to get a picture of from short samples because of the evolving arrangements. There's so much going on. But we start out really swinging on this tune with fine arranging. Bouncy Bones start things out with the trumpet section next, then saxes and a full band build up. Let's hear things get going. Man, there's so much happening in there. David Smith is up first for an exciting trumpet solo, and the backing arrangement is really cool too. Let's hear some of that. Tim Amakos follows with a tenor sax solo. Both soloists really get to stretch out, and the ending gets the different horn sections really popping, and then the rhythm section is back to push it to the finish. Track 2 is Not Even Close, and the notes say that Györ wrote this for his quintet in tribute to Vanguard Jazz Orchestra founder, the great Thad Jones, and he recorded this on his debut album. This one is fun and rambunctious at the start before things pop together for tight swinging. I really like the low-end bari and bass trombone parts that come through. The soloists on this one are Bob Sabin on bass, Hashem Asadullahi on alto sax, and Sam Blakesley on trombone. Let's hear some of Asadullahi's alto sax solo on this one that keeps some of the sense of humor from the start of the tune. Blakesley is playful with tricky slide work on the trombone, and Hyuna Park gets a little piano section in before the final build-up to a fun finish that recalls the playful beginning. Track 3 is Triceratops Blues, and this is the first tune that Györ wrote for his three-horn band. This arrangement builds up from the bones with some unusual harmonies and muted trumpets. The arrangement is interesting and builds gradually to screaming trumpet lines, bringing in solo exchanges from Bill Drews on alto sax and Max Siegel on bass trombone. Let's check out some of that. That's a lot of fun. Maybe that's what a Triceratops would have sounded like.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing.
After the solos, it comes down quietly, like the beginning, to build up the arrangement again into neat, tricky rhythmic horn lines and drum fills from Andy Watson. And the ending gets softer, kind of like a dinosaur trudging away slowly. Track 4 is First Step, a hard-swinging tune. Hyena Park gets the spotlight at the beginning on piano, and the horn sections gradually come in, building up into a big arrangement. Let's check it out. Soloists on this one are Billy Drews on soprano sax, Nick Vianis on trombone, and Dave Nevis on trumpet. Great backing horn arrangements cheer them all along, mixing up the rhythmic feels along the way. Let's hear some of Drews' soprano solo and the cool arrangement. Good energy there. Track 5 is The Other Way, and the notes say, a bold venture into 12-tone technique. Big band and 12-tone composition, are you ready for that? Well, it's so rhythmically fun that you won't have bad dreams of Schoenberg listening to it. Let's hear it get going into a sax solo from Rich Perry. And let's hear Yao himself solo over this creation of his. And the ending of this tune has playful interactions with the drums to stacking horn hits. Track 6 is Early Morning Walk, and Yao is featured for the start of this Latin-feeling tune. They get some lush horn harmonies backing his trombone. Let's check it out. Let's hear some more of his improvisations, too, a little later on. Trumpet gets to scream out on the next section, leading up to a rippling rubato piano solo from Hyena Park. Yao is back for more ideas in the final arranged section that gets back in tempo. Track 7 is Song for Nolan, Yao's son. This starts cheerfully and swinging with a nice arrangement, including muted trumpets. The feel changes up to a straight Latin beat and back to swing. Perry is up first for a tenor sax solo that floats effortlessly over the rhythmic change-ups below. Carl Maraghi has Barry sax solo exchanges with Matt McDonald's trombone, so let's hear a little of that. They make a big finish together, and the ending arrangement is quite unique. And the recording ends up with track 8, Herbie Hancock's Finger Painting, from the 1979 VSOP Quartet recording 5 Stars that was recorded in Japan with Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. A charming arrangement here with horns building over Park's sparkling piano. The bass trombone really pops out in spots, and it gets swinging over walking bass before pulling back. Yeah, there's a great sax solo section before a trumpet solo from John Lake and a playful piano solo from Park. On this tune, let's hear the ending of the tune and the recording. And that's it. Really fine arranging on a program of almost all original compositions from John Yao, some of them reworked from previous recordings and performances. I was impressed by the energy this album conveys straight through. Everyone seems to be excited to perform these tunes, and it shines through in the ensemble playing and solos. Yao has arranged these charts to have new ideas coming along throughout each tune, with great backing sections for the solos too. Denser harmonic sections and even a 12-tone adventure are buoyed along by infectious rhythms. The solos, as I highlighted, are varied, and Yao gets 2 features for his own playing as well. It's got a balance of what you want from a traditional big band and new and adventurous elements as well.
Big band records are often a lot of fun to listen to, despite the difficulty of putting them together. They actually have this great effect on the listener. And this one was certainly really fun. I liked it a lot. The recording is crystal clear. The different sections of the band are easy to distinguish, not just by timbre, but by the crisp tone of all the instruments get on the recording. They all sound razor sharp in ensemble. I especially like the playful disorder into order approach of Not Even Close, which also had references to different eras of playing. I thought I heard a little Glenn Miller in there as well, like in the smoother sort of swing brass in the left channel at points. And there are different styles of harmony in the piece too. It's a completely unpredictable track. I also love that the baritone sax was paired with the trombone for a trading of 8 solo section and song for Nolan. 2 sounds I love to hear. Cool. I'm sure that stood out for you too, yeah. Great arranging that brings out the joy and humor of these performances, and all those great bass instruments kind of trudging along on Triceratops blues are pretty great too. There's a lot of contrast and counterpoint in the compositions, keeping the ear and body entertained. This was a fun, enjoyable, and uplifting listen, and I would say that John Yao's work as an arranger was well worth his time.
Yeah, and they're played so enthusiastically. It just really comes through on the recording.
Yeah, that seems to have been a theme tonight. There was enthusiastic playing on our Baroque recording and the Onyx brass, too. A lot of enthusiasm tonight.
Well, good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for episode 220. We want to say thanks again to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we've got music lined up for episode 221 already. What's on the classical side, Mike?
Well, I'm a big fan of Rachel Podger's violin playing, and her new album, we had to do it just because it's called Just Bieber. Not to be confused with Justin Bieber. Get the joke there? Okay, we'll have that next week. Heinrich Bieber's violin compositions, which I've actually lived with for a long time by now. I first heard about him in the 90s. We also have an album called French Impressions. Now, this is by Rachel Barton Pine, another violinist I really admire. And this is not Debussy and Ravel when we talk about French Impressions. It's more obscure French composers. It's Ernst Chausson and Germaine Taillefer, whose music is a bit in the ascendant these days. I hadn't heard from her until only really recently. And our contemporary composer of the week is one of my favorites, Erkki Ventur, his 10th symphony, nicknamed Hidas. So we'll hear that next week too, along with 2 other orchestral works by him.
All right, sounds interesting. On the jazz side of the program, we're going to do an Asian exploration here, Mike.
No.
With starting out in Japan here, I'm always looking for Japanese recordings that I want to feature, and I've got one here, 3 tenor saxophonists working together on More Chaos from Tenors in Chaos. This is on Etak, Takuya Kuroda, the trumpet player's label, and this came out on the 18th, so we hear some Japanese musicians on that. And then we're going to check out trombonist Peter Lin. I believe he's a Taiwanese-American, and his Asian-American Pacific Islander Jazz Collective on OA2 with Identity. And then we're going to hear from one of our favorite pianists, Art Hirahara, with his new Positone release, Piece Unknown. This recording is actually made a few years ago, but it's just coming out now, and it features all of his original compositions, which are always worth hearing, plus a full horn lineup of all of our favorite Positone players. So I'm going to listen to it anyway, so I may as well share it with all the listeners. Anyway, I'll have all of these recordings, classical and jazz, except for the Tenors in Chaos. It's not on Deezer yet, although it might show up before I get things put together. We'll have it on a Deezer playlist a couple hours after this episode is published, and I'll have a link to that on our Facebook site as well. Any final words, Mike?
Well, looking forward to the upcoming listening week. Ready to start.
It's too hot out there for parts of the days here and now to spend the whole day outside, so you have to come in the cool and do some listening.
Indeed. And I'll be doing just that, certain days anyway.
All right. That's all for this episode then. Until episode 221, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.